The case of the former American Idol contestant, loving father, and husband, accused of shooting and killing his wife with their young daughter sleeping close by, just went to a whole new level.
Step forward.
You want evidence.
What's that?
A grand jury has indicted Caleb Flynn on nearly a dozen charges, including 4 counts of murder.
Come on, honey.
The potential new evidence in this case of a seemingly perfect family shattered by violence. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. When Caleb Flynn got a golden ticket on season 12 of American Idol, this was back in 2014, in a segment, he was asked what makes him unique. And this was his response, quote, "I absolutely love the Lord. I love my wife more than anything." That same person, Caleb Flynn, is now facing almost as many charges as years since he made that statement. He is now accused of his wife's murder. Flynn appeared before a judge today after the grand jury indicted him on 11 charges. This is a picture of Flynn in court sitting with his attorney Thursday per WHIO-TV. Authorities say he shot and killed his wife Ashley inside their home on February 16th. It was around 2:30 in the morning that a very emotional and flustered Flynn called 911. And as we go over these new charges and where this case could go next, I want to bring you along with this investigation and how we got to this point.
Oh my God.
Miami County 911.
Oh my! Somebody broke into my home. Somebody broke into my home and shot my wife.
Are they still in there?
I don't know.
Okay, what's the address?
Kid City, Ohio. Please hurry. Please hurry.
Okay. What are you seeing?
My wife she's got 2 shots to her head.
That was the start of the 911 call from Caleb Flynn, and you can hear him specifically tell the dispatcher that his wife was shot twice. Law enforcement rushed to his house. All of this took place in a small and quiet town, Tip City, Ohio. It's a community north of Dayton, the home where this violence took place. It's typically a peaceful community, a place where you would raise children on a cul-de-sac.
Corey?
Okay.
I've checked this right here, nothing else.
Okay.
My daughters are in the bedroom over there, they're still asleep.
Okay, have you checked on them?
The 911, yes. As of right now, no one else comes in here, period. No, every door. No one.
Okay.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God.
Hey, sit. You want to sit down?
No.
Okay. Take a breath.
Is she gone?
Look at me. Look at me. Take a breath. Okay?
I can't.
Look at me. I need you to breathe, okay?
Try not to touch much. What do I do with my daughters? What do I do with my daughters?
Right now, I need you to breathe, okay?
Now, the Flynns have 2 young daughters. Both of them are roughly elementary age. And you can hear Caleb say that the girls are still in their rooms as police arrive. Now, the inside of the house, a lot visually has been redacted as far as the body cam that's been released by authorities in Tip City. The audio, though, that is very clear. And you can hear some of the conversation that the officers are having with Caleb Flynn. And you also hear, as they go through the home, different pieces of evidence that they pick up. But the audio drops out when they are specifically questioning Caleb about his wife and about what he may have seen inside the home. Caleb allegedly told investigators that someone broke into their house in the middle of the night and shot and killed Ashley. Her body was found in the bed. All of this taking place with their 2 daughters sleeping nearby. Now, that 911 call, I think that's going to be really important as this case goes forward, not just because it just shows you the emotion of what Caleb says took place, but in that call, you can hear him say the girls are still sleeping.
My daughters are here. My daughters are here.
Where's she at?
She's in the bed. She's in the bed.
Are you with her?
I am in the room. I'm looking at her. Yes, please.
Okay. You guys have the door locked?
We have the doors to the garage locked, but into the house, yes. Please, wake up. Please.
Now, Caleb told investigators that he has guns in the house, and he says that he keeps a handgun in the center console of his car.
Squad is in around there, not staying together. They can respond. Yes, one person only.
Oh, that door's open over there.
Yes, please.
That back door's open. Is that lead outside? Because I can't see. Is that a closet? Okay.
The center console of the truck. So.
It is. Should we have him? Hey, look at this. Watch out. Oh no, it's paint.
Don't touch the
Do you see any blood along the truck at all?
back doors out.
Hey, is someone watching him? Somebody needs to be watching him.
Now, in cases like this, and especially if you follow true crime and you're a regular here on Law and Crime, you know it is no surprise that police do look to the significant other when you have cases like this. And it's no surprise that police in this situation, they wanted someone to keep an eye on the spouse, even if that spouse is claiming that they are in some ways a victim because they were inside this home when they say someone came in and committed this terrible act of violence. But you see the police here saying that they want to keep an eye on Caleb. Now, Caleb was also very clear with some specifics, not just the 2 gunshots that he said that his wife was hit by, but he also specifically said that the door to his garage was open. And you have to wonder, are pieces of information like that, are they too specific? How did he know that that was the door that this intruder allegedly came in from? And again, you have to wonder, why didn't he wake up the girls to make sure they were okay after this person allegedly broke into their house and killed his wife? Now, even though we don't specifically hear Caleb tell officers what he saw on that night that Ashley was shot, on the body cam video, police do seem somewhat suspicious of his story from the jump.
The girl's okay.
Yes, girls are okay. Okay, you're good. Sit down.
Do I go on do I call anybody?
Hold on, honey. Okay.
God.
Do you want to let him?
Is there a dog in the county?
Now, police had dogs that tried to track down this alleged violent intruder that Caleb was talking about. They also put drones up in the air. And the day after Ashley was found dead, police said they were working a theory that this was a burglary that had turned violent, but the dogs didn't find anything. The drones weren't able to pick up any sort of evidence of an intruder that was on the run after allegedly killing Ashley. Now, as this investigation went on, though, and police said that they followed that theory that there was a violent burglary, you had people in this community who really stood by Caleb's side. This is crime scene video per WHIO TV. Now, when we talk about Caleb, he's not only someone who was once on American Idol, he made it out of the kind of blind audition round that you do in front of people like Simon Cowell. So he gets the golden ticket, and then the next round is when he was eliminated. This was before any of the live shows that you saw. It's certainly still an accomplishment. Talks about how good of a musician Caleb Flynn was. And he was really a fixture in their local church. Both of the Flynns were a fixture in the faith community in the Dayton area and Tip City, Ohio. because Caleb was also a member of the church band. He was a worship leader for a period of time. It is now believed that he was working for a flooring business in the area. His wife, Ashley, she was a very key part of the community. She was a middle school volleyball coach, and she was also a substitute teacher. And one thing that has stood out, and I've talked about this before in previous episodes, is just how the community could not even fathom the idea in the hours after Ashley was found dead that Caleb Flynn would be the person responsible. And when you look at the body cam video, there is a woman who has not been officially identified who comes to the house to comfort Caleb. Watch this.
Come on, honey.
Any squad you looked at yet? I mean, you think you just squad come just to look at him?
The girls don't know. The girls are sleeping. Can I take, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do either.
I'm just I'm in shock. Yeah, I think maybe.
Do you want to sit down on the steps?
And then you have the moment at the Tip City Police Department. It appears to be either the next day or hours later that police walk into the lobby and they put Caleb Flynn under arrest. And as that happens, there is a man who is standing with Caleb, and he just cannot believe that Caleb Flynn would be the one accused of this.
Step forward.
You want evidence.
There's still a lot that we don't know in this case, but prosecutors are alleging that the sobbing, the convulsing, the story of a violent intruder entering the Flynn's home in the early hours of the morning and killing Ashley Flynn, according to prosecutors and police. The FBI was also in this investigation. They believe all of that was an act. And it appears that a grand jury agreed with the evidence that has been laid out by prosecutors and authorities, because a grand jury just indicted Caleb Flynn on some very serious charges. This is the new 4-page, 11-count grand jury indictment. Flynn appeared in court for an arraignment on Thursday. Caleb's now accused of aggravated murder and 3 counts of murder in the death of Ashley. Now, that is a total of 4 different murder counts in a case where allegedly there is just one victim. And we're going to talk in just a moment about how he could be facing multiple murder counts in the death of one person. Flynn is also facing 2 counts of felonious assault, 3 counts of tampering with evidence, and 2 counts of intimidation of an attorney, victim, or witness in a criminal case. Now, it hasn't been released who authorities say Flynn allegedly intimidated. There are firearm specifications attached to the murder charges. In the news release from authorities in Tip City, they write, quote, "If convicted, Flynn will serve life in prison without the possibility of parole." It's important to note that the death penalty is legal in Ohio, but no one has been executed in the Buckeye State since 2018. At his new arraignment Thursday, Flynn's attorney entered a not guilty plea on the 11 charges Flynn is now facing. Originally, Flynn's bond was set at $2 million. The judge decided that the bond would now be set at $3.5 million. Ashley Flynn would have turned 38 years old just a little more than a week after her death. Her family held a private memorial service to honor her life, and this is the statement that the family released in the wake of Caleb's arrest, and it goes like this, quote, "Our hearts are shattered. Ashley brought endless light to our world, and we are trying to navigate this immense loss. Our family believes this arrest was made carefully and not without serious consideration. After speaking with both local police and federal authorities, we trust the proper steps were taken and the process is being handled appropriately. We kindly ask for privacy as we work through this complex situation. We are clinging to our faith, just as Ashley did each and every day." Joining us now to talk more about this case and what could happen next is Safa Robinson Ferrer, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. It's always great to have you here on Law and Crime. What does this indictment mean now for Caleb Flynn?
The indictment means that he's been formally charged by way of a grand jury, and essentially there was enough probable cause or reasonable cause to believe that a felony occurred in this particular case, multiple counts of murder, firearm activity, witness intimidation, and things like that. And so ultimately what happens is the prosecution will put together proof or evidence before a grand jury to get an indictment if there is enough evidence. Now, there's been a term that many people have probably heard that a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich, which can be very true. However, I think with the evidence that we've seen to this point, which includes body camera footage, that tells me that there's certainly some teeth to the allegations that the government is bringing forth.
And at least from what he had said, his own words is that his wife was shot twice, and then he was facing 2 charges of aggravated assault. And I think that's changed a little bit with this, but he's facing 4 different types of murder counts. Well, there's 3 that are very similar, where it's the 3 counts of murder, and then there's 1 count of aggravated murder, but there's only 1 victim who lost her life in this case. I know states can be different, with different statutes, but typically how could they be charged with 4 counts of murder when there's only 1 victim?
Yeah, so ultimately, and what I think is the case here, is that there are a number of theories that the prosecution is going with, and the evidence was sufficient to fit enough of those theories, which led us to 4 counts of murder. So we have the aggravated murder, which indicates to me that there was some sort of aggravating factor. Whatever Ohio's definition of that would be sufficient. So it could be aggravated because it's a family offense, this is his wife, or it could be aggravated because of the nature of what occurred. Is it extremely or incredibly heinous? Are there aggravating things that took place where this is not just a typical murder, but it heightens it because of the gruesome nature of the act or anything like that? And then we have those additional 3 counts of murder, which ultimately include 2 counts of what we would call a New York felony murder, where during the commission of a crime or during the commission of an act of violence, this murder ultimately took place as a result of that activity. And also knowingly and purposefully planning this murder against his wife, or that's what the allegation speaks. So that is the reason why we see those multiple counts of murder, and would certainly seem that whatever evidence was presented certainly was enough at least to get the prosecution over the hurdle initially to those charges.
I know we still would have a long way to go, but I mean, theoretically, he could be found guilty on these 4 counts of murder as well and face sentences for each and every charge, even though there's just the 1 victim who's Ashley Flynn in this case.
Absolutely. And so he can be found guilty on all charges. And what I think is going to be interesting here is, and I think what the defense will likely do, is make a request for something that we call as a bill of particulars, asking the prosecution to particularize how they intend on proving each and every element of the offense. And so if the government's theory or the prosecution's theory is that he pre-planned this murder, which is where we also get the aggravated murder from, and he did a number of acts that ultimately led to her murder, which acts specifically caused the death. And so that's going to be something that the defense is going to be arguing, is that what the government is alleging in the indictment is not exactly the manner of death, and the way that they find that out, or at least get to that point to argue that, is by way of something that we call as the bill of particulars.
So Safa, there are some specifications on each of those murder charges for the use of a firearm. Why do those matter? If he's accused of murder, that's as serious a charge as there is. Like, why does that specification have an impact on any of this?
Well, so ultimately the states, and in this particular case, Ohio, has specific carve-outs for when an individual is murdered with a firearm. When we see scenarios like that, when there are allegations of use of firearms in the commission of a murder, then the government is able to bring about charges that are consistent with that. There may be other charges where you just have a traditional murder where, maybe there was a choking incident that ultimately led to a murder, or some sort of other act, maybe a fight and things like that. And again, when we're talking about firearms, those can certainly escalate and be an aggravating factor into a murder. And so Ohio seems to have delineated the use of a firearm in the commission of a murder as opposed to your traditional murder scenario.
And when you see aggravated murder, you see these specifications. Ohio is a state that does have the death penalty. I'm not sure how often it's actually used, but where are we in the point of the proceedings now that he's been indicted where a prosecutor may have to make a decision if they want to pursue that? Does this case, even though, fit something that seems like it could be a death penalty case?
Any case where there's murder and there's a death penalty and it's a death penalty state certainly could qualify. How often the government or the prosecution is willing to use that just depends. I think we see that a lot more in scenarios where, we have serial killers and things like that. Would that fit this scenario where there's just intimate partner violence is to be determined. And if it is a capital murder state, one of the things the prosecution can do to try to force a plea is to use that death penalty factor as leverage and essentially say, hey, if your client pleads guilty to one count of murder, then we will move sentencing and ask for life in prison and take the death penalty off the table. But if he does want to go forward and litigate this case, then the death penalty is on the table. And that will come in later, usually after there's a guilty verdict, then we get to the penalty phase. And ultimately that sentence will be determined either by a judge or by a jury.
There are these other two charges that really stood out to me as well, which is 2 counts of intimidation of an attorney, victim, or witness in a criminal case. And we don't know at the time we're recording this who these witnesses are or who he is being accused of intimidating. We do know that the couple's 2 young daughters were in the home, allegedly sleeping when all of this took place, which is, one of the more difficult parts of this story. But when I watch the body camera video, he does not come across to me, Caleb Flynn, as when I think of an intimidating, certainly if you're accused of murder, that's certainly terrifying. But when you think of traditionally an intimidating person, this big person, big, mean person who's that he just doesn't seem intimidating to me. I guess if I had met him on the street, I'm trying to dance around it. He just doesn't come across to me as this big, tough, intimidating guy. But here he is facing a legal term of intimidation. What does that typically mean in terms of how you can meet the threshold of intimidating someone in a case like this?
Absolutely. So what ultimately can happen is although he may have this demeanor that may or may not have this demeanor that's larger than life or his physical presence can be intimidating to a person, there has to be an accompanying act. So particularly in a scenario like this, what you might see is an individual say, hey, if you testify against me, I'll kill you. Or, hey, if you agree not to testify against me, then I'll give you $5,000. So ultimately, what tends to happen is that the defendant or an individual will try to sway a person or intimidate a person by way of words or an act to get them to not cooperate with the prosecution or give out certain evidence or have certain conversations with law enforcement that ultimately would be detrimental to the case for the defendant.
So it would have to be more than just telling someone not to testify. Would there have to be the threat that comes with, there's an or else to it?
And that, to your point too, that is actually sufficient. When you tell, if somebody, especially if they're under subpoena, to go before the grand jury to give testimony, and you tell somebody, do not go and testify against me, then the government, in theory, could bring a charge that you're trying to intimidate the witness. If that person goes to the government and says, hey, John Smith told me that, if I don't come in and testify, or he told me not to come in and testify before you, but I'm here anyway, then the government's wheels are going to start spinning and think, let's charge this as a witness intimidation. Now, whether the proof is sufficient is another question, because to get an indictment, that's one thing, but to get a conviction based off of those charges with the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt is something completely different. So just because somebody is accused of something by way of grand jury or through an indictment doesn't mean that gets the government over the hurdle of proving each and every element of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt.
And I want to bring up the body cam video now because, we've seen a lot of cases where people are accused of horrific crimes. And I feel like body language is always very tricky to try and diagnose, even if you're a body language expert, because you can look, it's just very subjective to how, you could look at him and say that he's somebody who, I'm sure there's people who feel one way about it. They believe that he did it. And then there's other people that could look at this. I mean, he's incredibly emotional. He's alleging that someone came into the house and did this. That's terrifying. From the former prosecutor point of view for you, like when you watch Caleb Flynn in this body camera video, like what are some of the things that stick out to you?
A couple of things that stuck out to me is certainly his behavior. I mean, he calls 911, and ultimately what I'll back up and say is that when you have cases where, a husband or a wife has been murdered, traditionally speaking, the spouse is the first person that's going to be investigated, no matter the circumstance. We know he called 911. I think it's a little odd that at 2 something or 2:30 in the morning, someone is breaking into your house and killing your wife, as opposed to, committing acts of violence against the entire family. And realistically speaking, we don't see random acts like that as often as you would think. We see those scenarios where, there may be drug dealers and things like that, or there may be a home invasion type scenario where someone comes in, kills one of the individuals in the home, or kills everybody in the home. And that's that. So I think that's odd. That stands out to me. Not only that, but he ultimately tells law enforcement that he has a number of firearms or shotguns and things like that. And we know that he kept a firearm in his truck, which keeping it in the truck versus keeping it at home inside the home is a little odd. And that stands out as well. And not only that, and I don't know if we know this information as of yet, but what type of caliber of weapon was used to commit this crime? And was that the same weapon that could be used? And I think when the police officers had gone into the vehicle, they noticed that the center console, or wherever the firearm was located, was actually left open. So all of those things, as a former prosecutor, make me think that this person could have had something to do with this. Specifically because there are firearms in the home, and we know that. There could be a motive, and we don't know what that is as of yet. And when you tell police officers that there's a firearm that you keep stored in your vehicle, and then at 2:30 in the morning they go to that vehicle and it's actually open, those are things that would make anybody go,
Yeah, and I think too, like when, I remember one part of the 911, there's a couple parts that like stood out to me was he didn't go to check on the kids. The girls are still
that
sleeping.
too.
He said,
Yes.
And you're just thinking like, you go through this bit where, and also Ashley Flynn was in the bedroom. Where was he? And then, if a burglar came in and did it, and he had very specific details about that. And then, you would think, and I've never been in that situation, that the kids would be the first thing you would go to, but they're still sleeping through all of it. So I can see why people on the outside might look at that and be like, that's a little suspicious. On the other hand, like he's incredibly emotional, and we've seen plenty of cases where you think like that someone should be a little bit more emotional in a situation like this. And then there's just people, whether it's when he's arrested, there's someone there who just seems so shocked and confused that he would be the person, saying what evidence is there. And then there's a woman who comes and comforts him outside of the house. As a criminal defense attorney, like how could you use this body camera video if this is going to be shown in court? Like, how do you look at it through that lens and try to, if we get to the point where there's a jury, that you can maybe stop some of the damage that the prosecution could do when they play it?
Yes. So first things first is he called 911. If he wanted to hide the fact that he committed this murder, then why would he be the one to call 911? Then we get to the body camera footage and ultimately see that he has a highly emotional reaction in response to what occurred with his wife. And we've seen in scenarios, and of course everything can be subjective, where individuals who are not as emotional because there's some sort of intention there in terms of wanting to commit that act towards their spouse or to their partner. But that's not the case here. He's highly emotional. He's breaking down. He's crying. He's on the ground. He's cooperative with law enforcement. He's telling them everything that he needs to tell them so that they can further their investigation, including having firearms in his home. And it's not illegal for him, at least at this point that we know of, to possess those firearms. And if he wanted to conceal the fact that it was him and, we're disputing that, then certainly he would not have allowed them in his home. He wouldn't have called 911. He could have packed his daughters up and left and been on the run. So those are the things that the defense ultimately would use as leverage to say, listen, The government can say XYZ that he killed his wife, but you know what? Is a man that killed his wife actually going to be trying to call 911, trying to, save her or be emotional with regard to, how this act occurred? There's no motive. There's no indication that there's a motive. So all of those things would be used with the body cam. And then you hear one of the officers in the body cam start to say, keep an eye on him, keep an eye on him. And that's where we say, you know what? That officer seemed to have some sort of bias, even though he was cooperative with that officer, where she felt that he needed to be watched because that officer already had it in her mind that he was a criminal and that he was responsible for this act, and he was not.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that, because you assume that that's going to be, a major piece of evidence is this. This is how he responded, his demeanor, how the jury sees it. We'll wait and see. I think one question too is where's the alleged murder weapon? Where did that go?
Absolutely. That's going to be the biggest thing here is what type of weapon was used to commit that murder, and was it the same weapon as the weapon that was located in the vehicle? If it was not, then we have other questions because where was it located? What was her time of death in conjunction with the time that he called 911 and the time that the police responded? Would that have been enough time for him to maybe discard the weapon? Also, a lot of times people nowadays, they have Ring camera footage or footage on their homes. So if he had footage on his home or any of the other neighbors, if we know that he left and came back, that ultimately may come into play and we may see those things come in the future. So that could answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens next. Incredibly sad case. You think of these two young girls now without their mom, and their dad is facing some very serious charges. Safa Robinson-Ferrer, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for breaking down this case with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also find our episodes streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.